Hi, I'm Lance Hendricks and you're watching Bryan Lomax's Movie Talk.
Hello and welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk. Now, during my Q&A, which I did a few weeks ago, I was asked by Tim over at the Late Reviews, why no Blu-rays? Because behind me, obviously, you can see all my DVDs, but you can't see any Blu-rays, and that's because they're just off screen over there. Now, I don't have a right lot of them, just two shelves. I promised him during that Q&A that I would do a Blu-ray collection video, which I'm going to do right now. And then, yeah, from here on out, when I buy like a load more Blu-rays, I'll do update videos. So yeah, let's get started. I've got my box sets first, and then I've got my Blu-rays in alphabetical order that are in slip cases, simply because they look better on the shelf when all the slip cases are together. You get like a flat kind of surface to it, whereas if you have slipcase, non-slipcase, slipcase, not, it just looks a mess, quite frankly. So yeah, so I'll do my box sets first, then my slipcased Blu-rays, followed by my non-slipcased Blu-rays. First of all, we have Apocalypse Now. Now this has got the theatrical version of the film in and the Redux version, but it's also got the documentary by Sofia Coppola, Hearts of Darkness, which is like the making of it, big making of documentary. But it's a really nice set, really nice set. It's got art cards in it, a little booklet. It's just really beautiful set. I had to pick it up. I really like Apocalypse Now. I think I prefer the theatrical cut, to be honest. One of the best war films ever made. Next is Casino Royale. Bought this off a chap that I got to know because he was selling Blu-rays online, and he lived right next to me. So yeah, I picked this up off him, went round, had a look at his Blu-rays that he was selling, and this was one of them. And I just started my Bond reviews at the time. It's a really, really nice Blu-ray. It's like cardboard case, but just really nice inside. Really good artwork, really beautiful actually. It helps that the artwork is obviously of Eva, whatever her name is, can't remember. The Dark Knight trilogy, as if this wasn't going to be in my collection. Of course it is. Probably of my Blu-rays, my pride and joy, because it's my three favourite films. It's a really nice set. It's got a little booklet in it with excerpts from the larger book, which I do have down here. A really good kind of behind the scenes look at all three films. But yeah, just having those three movies on Blu-ray in a nice plush set, what more could I want? Next up, and this is a fairly recent purchase, is Gone Girl. I like this set. I like the little book you get with it. It's got like the Amazing Amy little book thing. I like it when they do that for films. It's like literally they've gone to the trouble of doing this whole book that ties in with the movie, with what the characters are doing in the movie. So yeah, it kind of makes the film feel more real, I guess, the events of the film. But yeah, a brilliant film by David Fincher, one of his best. And I think one day we'll get around to doing a commentary on it on movie night, because it's thoroughly deserving of it. Next up is the Dirty Harry collection, which I picked up for £12 from CEX, which is like a kind of cheap store they have over here. You trade things in, buy things second hand. But I only ever remember seeing maybe a couple of these movies when I was younger, and I didn't really take them in, wasn't really into them at the age that I was when I saw them. But now I am. Now I'm more of a Clint Eastwood fan, so yeah, I want to check these out. I want to go through them again. I've not seen them since buying this set, but I am going to eventually, and I'll probably review them as I do, to be honest. So yeah, looking forward to those. Next up is The Hobbit, first one, An Unexpected Journey. I got the extended editions, of course you have to. After seeing the Lord of the Rings extended editions, there was no way I was going to purchase the theatrical versions of these. It just wasn't going to happen, because I did that with Lord of the Rings, and then I ended up spending more money, getting the extended editions, and now I never watch the theatrical versions because the extended editions are just so good. So yeah, this is probably my favourite of the Hobbit films. A lot of people say it's Desolation of Smaug, Smog as we say over here. But I actually prefer this. I think it's got more of a flavour of Lord of the Rings, and I like the adventure side of it. I like that they go to different locations. It feels more, yeah, adventurous, if somewhat episodic. But I like it, and I like the stuff with Gollum. I love the fact that Gollum gets to come back and have this little touching scene with Bilbo. But yeah, cracking set. Just, I love the box on it. I love the kind of 3D thing that they have in here. Yeah, and it's put together really nicely, I think. So yeah, excellent. Now obviously if I've got parts 1, I'm going to have parts 2 and 3. Yeah, Desolation of Smaug has grown on me since I saw it in theatres. I don't know if it's just because I've seen the extended edition. There is a lot more actually in this extended edition. It does flesh it out a bit more, and it did kind of feel a bit rushed to me when I saw it in theatres. But I do still think that Smaug isn't handled in the best way. I think Benedict Cumberbatch's voice is fantastic for it, and the special effects are amazing. But I never feel like anyone's in danger, because just of the way that it's filmed, the way it's like when Smaug is breathing fire everywhere and people are just dodging it and just getting out of the way of it, and it's like it becomes like a roller coaster ride where it's thrilling, but you never really feel like you're in danger because you know it's been safety checked to death. But yeah, I thought Battle of the Five Armies was a slight improvement. I think it's probably my second favourite of the trilogy, with obviously Desolation being my least favourite. But that's not to say it's a bad film. I love this trilogy. I think it's great. I love Middle-earth. Peter Jackson could just make Middle-earth films for the rest of his life, as far as I'm concerned, because they're cracking stuff. Next up is another fairly recent addition to my collection, which is the Lethal Weapon box set. Lethal Weapon 1 to 4. Loved these films as a kid, particularly the first two. And yeah, this is just a really nice set. I bought this new. So yeah, I think I got this from the supermarket. It was like £10 or something, but really nice set. I mean, it's not in the sense that it has any particularly outstanding artwork or anything, but just the fact that it's got 4 really great action films in one set, and they're on Blu-ray, and for a really nice price as well. That's all of my box sets. So now we're on to the slip-covered Blu-rays, and first up we have Skyfall, a film that has really grown on me since it came out. I didn't think it was as good as Casino Royale. Casino Royale was still my favourite Bond film. This was a close second. But now I'm actually thinking maybe it might be my favourite. I think this has a better villain than Casino Royale, but I feel like maybe Casino Royale draws me in more to the characters, to the character of Bond. Yeah, the character Vesper Lynd, played by Eva Green. Eva Green, the woman I couldn't remember the name of earlier, but yeah, Skyfall, really top tier Bond film. And if we've got Skyfall, surely, yes, Spectre has to follow. This is a film I loved on first viewing. I went to see it opening night. Cracking, I just thought it was amazing. And then I saw it the next day, literally, like, went back, watched it the next day, and the impact was just gone. It wasn't as good. So like, whereas Skyfall, the impact kind of continued, it continued to grow. Not so with this film. Now, it's not a bad film by any stretch. It's certainly still one of the better Bond films when you compare it to some of the older stuff. But as far as Daniel Craig Bond films go, I actually think it's his weakest. Yeah, even more so than Quantum of Solace, which I still really love, actually. I think that's one of the most underrated films of all time. If I did an underrated films, top 10 underrated films video, that would be in it. So yeah, but Spectre is still a really good fun time at the cinema or on Blu-ray in the comfort of your own home. Next up is Braveheart, still sealed. I've not actually gotten around to watching this yet. It's so long, it's like you've got to pick your moment, haven't you? Now this is Peter's favourite film over at Bearded Movie Guy. This is Bearded Movie Guy's favourite film. And I can understand that. I understand why. It is a really great film and a fine directorial effort from Mel Gibson. But yeah, I am going to definitely get around to watching this again, maybe hopefully sooner rather than later. Next up is Buried, a film that I have seen most of, but in parts. I used to work in a cinema and I'd kind of stand in the back when there wasn't much to do. And yeah, I ended up watching this in bits here and there. So I think I've seen the whole film, but not like just sat down and watched it start to finish. And what I did see made me think, you know what, yeah, it's a really kind of tense looking film. And I liked the follow-up film from the director. What's the director's name? Rodrigo Cortez. He did a film called Red Lights with Robert De Niro, Cillian Murphy and Sigourney Weaver, which I thought was really good. Had a kind of Sixth Sense kind of vibe about it. Really underrated, I think. Yeah, and after having seen that and knowing that he did this, I went back and purchased this so that because I'd like to give this another go, give it another shot, give it a watch and see what I think about it after that. But yeah, probably one of Ryan Reynolds' best performances as well. Obviously it's just him in the whole film, so it kind of hinges on his performance really. It's one of those live or die by a particular actor. Next up is Crazy Heart. To be honest, probably not a film I'm going to watch again, but I picked this up really cheap from CEX. It's good. It's a cracking performance from Jeff Bridges and Maggie Gyllenhaal. But yeah, it's a good film. It's not a bad film, but it's not one I'm going to be rushing back to. Maybe in about 10 years when I've kind of forgotten it and not seen it again, I might slip it in. But yeah, there you go. It's good. I feel like I'm underselling it too much now. It is a good film. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Good performances, good songs, but yeah, maybe a storyline that I've seen one too many times. Next up is Dallas Buyers Club. Now, this is from director Jean-Marc Vallée, who I'm really growing to appreciate at the moment. But this film in particular is fantastic. It's not the easiest of watches at times, particularly if you don't like kind of sex in films. But it's a very good film. Outstanding performances all around, particularly Matthew McConaughey, but also Jared Leto. Watching Jared Leto in this really makes me look forward to seeing him as the Joker. I mean, I am anyway, especially after the Suicide Squad trailers. But before we'd seen those trailers, seeing him in this and just seeing what calibre of actor he really is gave me a lot of faith in what we're going to get in Suicide Squad. So yeah, definitely a good film. Hard hitting, but really good. Next up is Deadpool. I bought this just this week actually. So again, still sealed. We'll get around to watching it again soon. Probably one of the best comic books we've had, the comic book movies we've had this year. A lot of people really didn't like Batman v Superman. I loved it personally. It's probably still my favourite. I wouldn't necessarily argue that it's the best made, but it's my favourite just because I love those characters and I love what Zack Snyder did with them. But yeah, this comes a very close second. It does something different, but also very samey. So it kind of takes a traditional approach with regards to the narrative, but an untraditional approach with regards to how it kind of tackles the ways it puts that narrative on screen, obviously with the main character talking directly to us, the audience, breaking the fourth wall and whatnot. Next up is Ex Machina. One of the best science fiction films of the last 10 years, I would say, easily. Really looking forward to what Alex Garland is going to bring us next. And I'm still hoping and praying that they're going to be able to do the Dredd film, the sequel to Dredd. It's probably not going to happen. It's very doubtful it's going to happen. But Alex Garland wrote the script for that, and it's really underrated. It's kind of grown a bit of a cult following in recent years. But yeah, this is his first directorial effort, and boy is it a good one. Cracking film, great performances all around. First time I saw the lady that's in it, I forget her name, Alicia Vikander. She's got a strange name, that's why I always forget it. Yeah, really fine actress, and kind of showed it in this film. The first thing I saw her in. I really love Oscar Isaac as well. He's fast become one of my favourite actors. I'd say he's one of the top 10 actors working today in Hollywood, so or even out of Hollywood for that matter. So watch this if you haven't seen it. Next up is Fast and Furious 7. I bought this recently too. Yeah, it was my birthday recently. I got some birthday money. I went out and did a bit of a splurge on Blu-rays. This is one of the ones I got. You either like Fast and the Furious or you don't. They do what they say on the tin. They're fast and they're furious. They're stupid. They're dumb. They defy the laws of physics. So you either go along with it or you don't. Now the fifth film is still the best one for me of the franchise, and I think the sixth and the seventh are probably joint second. But yeah, it's a whole load of fun, and it's really heartbreaking to see Paul Walker's last performance. It's bizarre. Yeah, I don't think it quite works, the ending that they do to kind of send him off, but I get it, you know, I get it, and it's touching. It is touching. So yeah, it's a shame to have lost him the way we did. Next up is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I don't have any of the others on Blu-ray. I've got all of them on DVD, but this is the only one I've got on Blu-ray. And again, it's because I picked it up really cheap, like dirt cheap at CX. I thought, blimey, gotta have that. So yeah, so I got it. Not my favourite Harry Potter film, but it's very close. I think it's in my top 3 Harry Potter films. My favourite is still Order of the Phoenix. But yeah, what stood out to me most about this film is Snape's storyline. Snape's kind of ending, I guess. His bow out, I thought was really touching, and Alan Rickman really brought his A game to it, and I just thought it was well directed. David Yates handled it really well, so that you felt the impact of his final moments. Yeah, really great final film to a really good franchise that didn't start too well. I don't think Christopher Columbus kind of brought a particular stylistic sense to it beyond just translating the novel, and I think David Yates and obviously Alfonso Cuarón brought the style. They added style to it and made the franchise into something more. Next up is Hunger Games. The first film is actually my least favourite of the franchise, and I enjoyed it when I first saw it, but there were a few things in it that kind of were slight bugbears of mine. But I loved Catching Fire, and I also really loved the final film in the franchise, which is why I went back and I bought this. Again, still my least favourite of the series, but you have to have it, don't you? If you're going to have the other 3, you have to have the first one. Like I say, not saying it's a bad film by any stretch. It's definitely made better by the fact that the other 3 are better films. It makes you want to go back and watch it. And with that, we have Mockingjay Part 2. I have Catching Fire and Mockingjay Part 1 on DVD. I will get around to get them on Blu-ray at some point, I think, as I've got these 2 on Blu-ray. But yeah, I really love the ending to this. A lot of people were a bit sniffy about it. I don't know if that's just because they were a fan of the books, and I don't, you know, I've not read the books, so I don't know how much they've changed it or how faithful they were. But for me, as a film, it just worked. I really liked it. It was quite a surprise for me, because I'd heard from a lot of people that Mockingjay is the worst book of the series, but for me this made one of the better films, and I still like the first part to this when it comes to the films. I thought it was good, and sad to see obviously Philip Seymour Hoffman's last role on camera, on film. Yeah, so check that out if you're a fan of him. Next is Interstellar. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. He's my favourite director. I love all of his films. He's not done one bad film yet as far as I'm concerned. And I love this. It's his longest film. His films do seem to get progressively longer as they go on. I'm expecting a 5-hour epic from him at some point. But I love this film. It's a film of ideas, but also heart. It's 2001: A Space Odyssey with heart, not just intellect. And all the better for it, I would say. Yeah, really love this film. It was my favourite film of the year. I think, was it 2014? I think it was 2014. Yeah, my favourite film of that year. Love it. And Matthew McConaughey, again, part of the reconnaissance, as they call it. He's just become one of the best actors out there. Again, another one I would probably put in my top 10 actors at the moment that are currently working. Next up is Kingsman: The Secret Service. What a laugh riot. Really unexpected, because the trailers for this sucked. I must be perfectly honest. I wasn't pulled in by the trailers at all. I was pulled in a little bit by the fact that it was made by Matthew Vaughn, but beyond that, the trailers didn't do much for me. However, when I saw this film, it turned out to be one of the best of the year, and it had probably the best scene of the year with the church fight sequence. If you haven't seen that and you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to check that out. Colin Firth is just badass in it. So yeah, really fun comic book kind of movie that sends up the spy genre. It's kind of Bond on acid, basically. Next up is Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. This is a film that has vastly improved for me since watching it on Blu-ray. It wasn't one of the better entries in the Mission Impossible franchise, I thought, when I first saw it at the cinema, but I think scaling it down to a small screen has done something. It's helped. It's been helped by the translation, so to speak. Really good film. And the standout is the lady, I can't remember her name in it, let me just check. Rebecca Ferguson. She was easily the standout in this film. I'd never seen her in anything before. She came on screen, it just blew me away. Cracking performance and action that you can believe. She sold me on the action. I see a lot of kind of female action stars sometimes and they don't sell me on it. Gina Carano sells me on it because you know she can actually do it. Rebecca Ferguson sold me on it because she certainly looks like she could do it. So yeah, great action film. I still think Mission Impossible 3 and 4 are better, but only marginally so. Next up is Monsters: Dark Continent. This is the sequel to Monsters. I really liked Monsters. It was a very low budget film. It showed what you could do with just one cameraman, a sound man, and someone who knows what to do with special effects. So I've not seen this. It's had some good reviews. It's had some poor reviews. Empire gave it 4 stars, so that's promising. But yeah, I'll get around to watching that at some point. But I bought it just on the strength of the first one, which I have on DVD, by the way. So yeah, I look forward to that. Philomena is up next. Really love this film. It took me a long while to get around to watching it for whatever reason. But yeah, cracking performances from the two leads, Steve Coogan and Judi Dench, obviously. Why do they do that on why do they do that? Seriously, you have the actor there and they've got Judi Dench above him, and then you have Judi Dench there and they have Steve Coogan above him. I get it, just put them on different sides. It's annoying. But yeah, so it stars Judi Dench and Steve Coogan, but it's a cracking film. It's all about faith, and it's all about, yeah, I mean, that's why it speaks to me. It's about this nun who, not a nun, it's about a woman who grew up in a nunnery. What do you call them? A convent, that's it. She grew up in a convent. She had a child that was taken from her by the nuns and put into the hands of the parents, and she never saw him again. And it's a true story. And it's all about how, despite that kind of awful treatment she was given from supposedly people of faith, she never lost her faith. She retains it. And this character, the writer character played by Steve Coogan, he has a hard time dealing with that. He can't understand why she would still have this faith. And it's all about that, really, about how we treat others. And it's a beautiful, beautiful film. And it's actually written by Steve Coogan as well, which is quite surprising. I don't know why, because he does comedy brilliantly, so why wouldn't he be able to do a serious film brilliantly? So yeah, he went up in my estimation a lot after seeing this, just as a talent, I guess. So check that out. Really one of the best British films of the last few years. Next up is Side Effects, directed by Steven Soderbergh, which is the reason I bought it. Haven't seen it yet, but I will get around to it. I like the cast, so I'm looking forward to that one. Next up is Star Wars. Now, Star Wars The Force Awakens, that is. This was my joint favourite film of last year. I actually put it at my number 1 when I did my top 10 video, but if I'm being honest, it's my joint favourite with Steve Jobs. I'm a huge Aaron Sorkin fan, and I loved that film, but I loved this as well. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, so it was really quite a surprise to see this at my number 1 spot. But then I am a big J.J. Abrams fan. I love what he did with Star Trek, and I love Super 8. And like I say, Mission Impossible 3 is my favourite Mission Impossible film. So he's one of my favourite directors at the moment. Next up is Super. This is a bit like Kick-Ass, but even harder. So Kick-Ass was a pretty hard rated film, I'd say. But this goes a little bit further, I think. So if you found Kick-Ass a little bit hard to stomach, maybe not the film for you. It might be a while before I get around to viewing this again, but it does have some entertaining moments. And Ellen Page is fantastic in it. Really funny, a bit weird, a bit kind of... yeah, she's an oddball. And I don't want to ruin anything about where her character goes, but let's just say it's unexpected. Really unexpected. Next up is Total Recall. Not the original, but the remake, which I liked. Now, I'm going to say something here that a lot of people will probably vehemently disagree with. I prefer this to the original because I think the original is so overrated. I remember seeing it quite a lot when I was a kid. My brother really loves it, still loves it. But it's a good film, but it's not one of my favourites. I enjoyed this. I think it's really underrated. I like Colin Farrell. I'm a big Colin Farrell fan, actually. I thought he was cracking in season 2 of True Detective. But also, Seven Psychopaths is a fantastic film. And In Bruges, check In Bruges out if you've not seen that. Yeah, I liked it. It's it doesn't blow me away or anything. It's not the best thing since sliced bread, but it's a good kind of sci-fi film. The action sequences in it are really well directed. That's something Len Wiseman does quite well. His films aren't always the best from a script standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, but one thing he does know how to do is action. So yeah, it's a good action sci-fi film, I think. Next is Whiplash. Really looking forward to La La Land, which is the next film from director Damien Chazelle. Amazing job he did with this film. It's just... I don't understand how anyone can not see the genius of this film. And that final scene, fantastic. Just, for me, the heart of the film, in many ways, is the dad and the relationship that he has with the dad, the Miles Teller character has with his dad. And for me, the question I always ask when I watch it is, at the end of the film, would he have gone back if his dad hadn't have been waiting for him? If his dad hadn't have been there when he comes out of that door and gives him a hug, would he have gone back? That's the question I find myself asking. So there's a lot in there about different kind of tutorial styles, different teaching styles, and love versus ferocity, I guess. Just brilliant film, and the drumming in it is excellent. Miles Teller's performance is fantastic. What he did to convince us of his drumming expertise was above board. Next up is a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's White House Down. It is basically the inferior version of Olympus Has Fallen. It came out the same year as Olympus Has Fallen. It ain't anywhere near as good. But you know what? It's still a solid 6 out of 10, a high 6 out of 10. It's entertaining. Some decent action in it here and there. I'll give it a watch again at some point just to pass the time. So I think it is a good switch your brain off kind of movie. And there you go. And finally, with my slip-covered Blu-rays, we have my favourite David Fincher film. And that is Zodiac. This is by far his most underrated movie. When people mention their favourite David Fincher films, they usually say Social Network, they usually say Fight Club, they usually say Seven. Not often you hear people saying Zodiac. For me, it's just astounding. It's an astounding piece of filmmaking. Just the attention to detail, the just the procedural aspect of it. Fincher goes in really deep, and you really feel like you're being pulled along with this investigation, and I get really engrossed in it, with the characters, with story, with the facts that surround the events. Yeah, and obviously it's got the beautiful visual style that Fincher brings to all of his work. Love it, absolutely love this film. And so we're now on to the just the standard cased Blu-rays, no slip covers for these ones. First up is Attack the Block. It's not Shaun of the Dead. It's yeah, but it's good. It's a good runner-up. If you're putting the horror comedy kind of market of films out there, this is a good runner-up to Shaun of the Dead. It's good. I enjoy it. Some decent performances, some really cool creature designs. I'll be happy to watch it again at some point. Next up is Avengers Age of Ultron. This is a film that has actually got, for many people, has got worse over time, whereas for me it's got better. I had a few issues with it when it first came out of the cinema. Those issues were cleared up on a second viewing because I'd missed some information. Check out my review of the film where you clearly can watch me not understanding something that had gone on because I literally just missed a line of dialogue which explained it. That really shows how one line of dialogue in a film can make all the difference. But yeah, I like it. I really love it. I love it just as much as I love the first film. I think it probably doesn't have as much novelty value as the first film because that was the first time all those heroes got together, but I like it. I think it gets a bit of a bad rap. It's for some reason become a little bit cool to rag on it a bit. Next up is Batman Bad Blood. Now I spoke about this a little while ago in one of my episodes of Letterboxd Sundays. It's good. As far as these DC Animated Universe things go, I think there's too many characters in it. I don't like the character of Batwing. He's just superfluous. I don't like the whole enlarging Bat family, as it were. I just like the good old days when it was Batman, Robin, and throwing Nightwing in there as well. Yeah, but it's good. I like the choreography, I like the action in it. If you like Batman, you're going to want to watch it. Next up is Battlestar Galactica Blood and Chrome. I'm a huge fan of the TV series. Not the original, the 80s one, but the new one, the one that was done in the noughties. Fantastic show, really politically charged. Just, yeah, one of my top 5 TV shows of all time. This is a standalone movie they did after the TV series had finished. And it's quite good. It's, yeah, if you're a fan of the show, you'll like the movie. You don't need to see it if you've seen the TV show, and you don't need to really have seen the TV show in order to see this. It's just a nice standalone film that takes place within that universe. Next up is Birdman, the Best Picture Oscar winner, starring Michael Keaton and directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu. Cracking dialogue, cracking performances from everyone. I particularly like Edward Norton in it. Edward Norton had kind of been off form for a while, and I think he got right back on form when he did this. He's really charismatic and really funny in it as well, and as is Michael Keaton. They're kind of playing themselves in many ways in the film, which I think is very deliberate casting, I should say. Next up is another film that I think is really underrated. We'll probably go on that top 10 underrated films list I was talking about, and that is Cowboys and Aliens. Certainly the first half of this film for me was a really enjoyable watch, and I admittedly would say that the second half isn't as good as the first half, but it's still entertaining. I still enjoyed it. I liked the chemistry between the leads. I liked Daniel Craig in this film, and Harrison Ford's on good grumpy old man form. What's not to like? Next up is the Steven Spielberg classic E.T. For me, it's not one of my favourite Spielberg films, but then saying it's not one of his favourite Spielberg films is not really saying much, because he's done so many great films. This is still, by anybody else's standards, a really great film, and one of the first films I ever saw in cinemas. I think the first film I watched in cinemas ever was Neverending Story, followed by Peter Pan, and followed by this. So I think this was about the third film I ever saw in cinemas. It was on like a re-release. Next up, back again with the underrated films list. Not sure it'd make the top 10, or maybe it would, I don't know. But anyway, it's Green Lantern. I like this film. I like Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan. I like the way it's directed. I like the special effects. I honestly didn't see what people's problem was with the film. When you've got films like Catwoman out there and Ghost Rider, this is the least of your worries, of your troubles. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't give it the 10 out of 10 that Daily Star apparently gave it, but I think it's a solid 8 out of 10 film. Or it was last time I watched it. Maybe it'll have gone down if I watched it again. But I've seen it a few times, and each time I watch it, I'm kind of dreading watching it in case... like I watched Fantastic Four again recently, and I really liked that when I first saw it. And I saw it the second time, and I was like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? This is terrible. So I was kind of expecting that kind of reaction with this on repeat viewings. Like I'd see all the flaws in it that people were talking about. I've seen it a few times, and I still don't see them. Maybe I've just got, I don't know, some kind of beer goggle effect on my eyes, but... I enjoyed the film, I like it. I'd have liked a sequel, but clearly not going to get that one, are we? Sticking with Green Lantern, we have the DC Animated Universe film Emerald Knights, which is like a collection of short films, short stories that all make a cohesive whole. It's good. If you're a Green Lantern fan, it kind of delves into the Green Lantern Corps and how they work. It's enjoyable. I'm not a reader of the Green Lantern comic books, never really have been, but it opens the universe up, I think, for newbies if you don't know much about Green Lantern. Next up is Identity Thief. I like Melissa McCarthy, I do. I think she can have a habit of doing too much of this comedy stuff where it's kind of very samey. Feels like she's playing the same role a lot of the times, but she's good at it. The thing is, I think she's also very good at dramatic films. There's a film here, St. Vincent, I've got the poster for it. She does a really good dramatic turn in that film. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if one day she wins an Oscar. Because from what I've seen, she has the capability of turning on the dramatic chops. And she has a moment like that in this film. There's a bit where this character is very like extrovert, very kind of funny, very offensive in many ways. But there's a moment in the film where it's quite revealing. She lets her guard down, and it's a brilliant piece of acting in an otherwise average film. I watched this with my wife. We sat down and watched it together, and I enjoyed it. We both did. Like I say, it's not the best comedy in the world, but it's certainly far from being the worst. It's enjoyable, and I probably will give it another watch at some point in the future. So. Yeah, I enjoy it. Next up is Iron Man 2. This is actually the first Blu-ray I ever bought. First film I bought on Blu-ray. Again, a bit underrated, I think. I honestly think the first hour of this film is one of the best comic book movies ever made. If the last hour had have lived up to the first, this would be in my top 5 comic book movies. It's just, unfortunately, they felt the need, or they felt like they had to keep Whiplash in the film. I personally thought his job was done halfway through the film. There's nothing wrong with that. Get rid of him after that. He'd done his job. He'd fulfilled the purpose of that character. So when they make this big set piece at the end just for the sake of bringing Whiplash back, it kind of loses its way. But until then, really cracking stuff. Still enjoyable as well. It's not as bad as everyone makes out at all. Iron Man 3 is another one which people seem to have a problem with. Obviously, I can kind of understand the reasons why. If they're comic book fans, it completely takes a turd over the Mandarin character, which is like Iron Man's Joker. But I don't care. I wasn't a fan of the Iron Man comic books. I'm a fan of the Iron Man films, and I love what they did with the Mandarin. From what I've seen of him in the comic books and the animated series, he was a stupid character anyway, so I like what Shane Black did. First and foremost, this is a Shane Black film. If you don't like Shane Black, you're not going to like this. But I love it. Absolutely loved it. It's my favourite Iron Man film. It's been a while since I've seen the Iron Man films, like back-to-back kind of thing. But yeah, it's my favourite one. Unless you're talking the Avengers, then the Avengers becomes like my favourite Iron Man films. But standalone Iron Man films, Iron Man 3. Next is Jack the Giant Slayer. This is a film that I've seen the first third of, and for whatever reason I had to turn it off. I had to go and do something. I never came back to it. But I like Bryan Singer. I'm a fan of Bryan Singer. I like what he did with the X-Men films, and obviously Usual Suspects is a classic. From what I saw of this when I watched it, it's not going to be the best film in the world. But I got this really cheap. I'm a fan of Bryan Singer, so I'm going to give it a watch at some point. Next is Justice League Gods and Monsters. Pretty decent. I'm not a big fan of these DC stories where they go to an alternate reality and we see the characters we know but different versions of them. Because I always feel like, oh man, we've got to get to know these people again. Whereas if you're just stuck in the universe we know those characters. So it always feels a bit meh to me. But this actually does a pretty decent job, I think. I found the different iterations of these characters to be quite interesting for the most part. And it's a good story, decent story, well told. So yeah, if you like the DC Animated Universe stuff, again, this is a good one for you. Next up is Peter Jackson's King Kong. Really good film. Some dodgy special effects during the Brontosaurus stampede, and it does go on a bit. There are times where you do feel like the pace could be quickened up, but just a sheer spectacle as for the most part special effects bonanza. It is just top of the game, as far as Hollywood movies go. The T-Rex battle in it, stunning, absolutely stunning. For me, more entertaining than anything I saw in Jurassic Park. That's just me. Not saying Jurassic Park's bad. Love Jurassic Park, but that T-Rex fight where King Kong's fighting the T-Rexes, love it. One of the best scenes of any blockbuster movie, I think. Les Miserables is next. Loved this adaptation. I remember Les Mis from when I was a young boy. I saw the version with Anthony Perkins in it, and it really made an impact on me. It had a real big impact on me. It was one of the first kind of times that I started to think about death and the possibility of it, and what happens to us, what happens to our souls, and that kind of thing. And this deals a lot with with that faith element, with our lives here on Earth and what might become of them later. I guess it's quite a spiritual film. It's definitely got a lot of Christian themes in it, and I think the guy who wrote the original story on which it's based, if I can just find his name here, I can't remember his name, but he's a famous guy. He's also responsible for writing the original Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that story too has loads of Christian themes in it. Like, it's just littered with Christian theology, really good kind of meaty theology, and I can only assume the guy was a Christian himself. But yeah, as far as Christian movies go, this isn't specifically a Christian movie, but it is certainly one I would say is represents the what Christianity is about, and the themes that are in there very well. So if you're a Christian and you want a film that deals with your faith, a very good one, I think, to delve into. Next up is Man from U.N.C.L.E., a film I thought was quite underrated when it came out last year. There was a whole load of spy films that came out last year. Obviously Spectre, you got Kingsman, Secret Service. There was a couple of others out. I can't remember right now, but this was one of them. And this is another one that I was not expecting much from the trailer at all. In fact, I'd say the trailers were just downright crap. But the film was really entertaining. I reviewed this actually with a friend of mine, Nathan Ashman. He joined me on my review. The two of us got on camera and reviewed it. It was a really entertaining review, so yeah, check that out. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was really good. I liked the chemistry between the two leads. And again, Alicia Vikander popping up, doing a really good job. Really good actress. It's a very minor role, but she does quite a lot with it. Next up is Nightcrawler, one of my favourite films from the last few years. Jake Gyllenhaal's performance is absolutely astounding. He plays a character that is just totally unlikable, yet completely magnetic, has a really magnetic presence. You can't help but watch this guy. He's a bit of a train wreck. At least you think he is. He should be. He should be going downhill. He should have a really despicable end. But he doesn't. It's bizarre. It's like, actually, he's a success by the end of the film. And that's the, I don't know, the dichotomy, I guess, of this, you know, being a bad person and getting away with it. It's a really good film. A lot of people have compared it to Taxi Driver. I understand that reasoning. There's definitely a early Robert De Niro-like performance from Gyllenhaal, but really great stuff. Great support from Rene Russo as well. Getting on in years, but still pulling out some really good performances. Next up is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Really made me take notice of the Planet of the Apes films. I've never really been that big of a fan of them. I went to see the Tim Burton one because I was a Tim Burton fan. It's not great, is it? So I thought the franchise was pretty much dead, to be honest. Then this came out. Rupert Wyatt did this one, yeah. Did an astounding job with it. Really good. Character driven. That's the thing. Just deeply, deeply character driven. And you really feel for this main character, Caesar, this ape, who, yeah, you're drawn into him as a character, which is helped by some spectacular special effects and some motion capture by Andy Serkis. It was hard to believe they were going to follow that up with a decent sequel, to be honest, one that they could improve on. But oh boy, did they do it. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, one of my favourite films of that year. Just up to the action, up to the stakes, up to the character development. Yeah, it's better than Rise of the Planet of the Apes in every way, and that is not a slant on Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I should say. It just tells you how good it is, that it can be better than that. Next up is a film that would be very high up on my most underrated movies list, and that is Quantum of Solace. One of my favourite Bond films, I might add. Probably in my top 5 Bond films, which would be sacrilege, I think, to a lot of Bond fans who for some reason hate this film. I don't know what they're smoking, because I love it. It's a really tightly paced action film, well shot. I know there's a lot of shaky cam stuff in there, and I understand if that puts you off. It puts a lot of people off. Some people really don't like the Bourne films because of that reason. For me, it brought me into the action. I liked it, and I love Mark Foster as a director. He's directed some of my favourite films, Finding Neverland and Stranger Than Fiction being the two that are most noteworthy, but Monsters Ball as well. The guy is seriously underrated as a director, and I love this film. I like Olga Kurylenko in it as well. I think she makes for a really good Bond girl, and I think it makes a refreshing change that Bond doesn't bed her. So she's a character within her own right, not just someone for Bond to hop into bed with. Next up is The Raid 2, another film I commented on episode of Letterboxd Sundays recently. It's a good sequel, it's a good action film. It's not as good as the first one. I think it's a bit overrated. I think the story is quite formulaic. We've seen it many times before. It is not the greatest action film ever, as it says on here, and I don't think it holds much comparison to The Godfather, as a lot of people have compared it to. But maybe it's those reviews and those comparisons that really made me not like it as much as I thought I would. Maybe they kind of put my expectations up too high. It's a good film, solid action, really well made, and that's it. That's all that needs to be said about it. Next is Red Riding Hood. I got the alternate cut. I picked this up for £2. £2 for a Blu-ray. From the director of Twilight, which, you know, kind of puts you off a bit. But I feel this is a much better film. It's much better written, structured, and I think it's quite atmospheric. There's some real good use of the cinematography. I just think, yeah, I think Catherine Hardwicke does a much better job with this than she did with Twilight. probably budgetary constraints with Twilight are one thing, but source material not being particularly great either. I like Amanda Seyfried in it. Yeah, it's, it doesn't blow me away. It's a solid 6 out of 10. But I bought it because it's got the alternate cut in. So I've still not watched that alternate cut, but I will get around to it at some point. Next up is Resident Evil Extinction. I have the first 2 films on DVD, and I've got the next 2 films on Blu-ray. This is my favourite of the Resident Evil films. It's got a little kind of low-rent Max Mad. It's got a low-rent Mad Max vibe about it. And yeah, I think it's the most solidly structured of the Resident Evil movies that we've had. It's the best directed of them. Russell Mulcahy directed this, who did Highlander. I think he brings some much added visual flair to the franchise. I'm not saying Paul Anderson doesn't have visual flair, but it often feels very CGI, kind of computer generated. There's a gloss, a sheen to it that just takes away any kind of reality from proceedings, whereas this feels a bit dirtier, a bit more grounded, a bit down to earth. I like it. It's alright. It's still not a fantastic film. None of the Resident Evil films are. It's a 6 out of 10 movie, but it's a guilty pleasure. The very definition of the word. Followed up by the next one, in which Paul Anderson did return for the director's chair. This is probably his best effort on the Resident Evil films. I like some of the monster stuff in it. I like some of the effects and some of the slow-mo stuff. The 3D worked really well, I thought, in the cinema when I saw it, as well as 3D can work, I think. I still think it's a bit of a gimmick. Seven Psychopaths, brilliant film. Anyone who's seen In Bruges, if you liked In Bruges, you need to watch this film. It's fantastic. I was put off a little bit because, well, a lot of people said it's not as good as In Bruges. It's a bit of a step down. I don't agree. I completely disagree. Actually, it's fantastic. Really dark humour, really funny. Again, deals with a lot of religious themes, Christian themes, mainly Catholic. I think that's a result of the director, Martin McDonagh. I think he's got a Catholic background, maybe. It seems to come out in a lot of his work, as with his brother as well. His brother made Calvary, if you've seen that film, obviously. Catholicism reigns supreme in there. But yeah, I like the way they deal with those themes. And Christopher Walken, man alive, Christopher Walken is good in this film, as is Sam Rockwell, as is Colin Farrell. Just watch it. Fantastic performances from great actors. Next up is Shadow Dancer. I picked this up cheap, and the main reason actually was because Gillian Anderson's name is in the credits. Big X-Files fan, big fan of Gillian Anderson, so yeah, I wanted to watch it. Not seen it yet though, we'll get around to it at some point. Next is Silver Linings Playbook, fantastic film. I'm a huge David O. Russell fan. This is one of his best. Excellent chemistry between the two leads. I think it deserved all the nominations and awards that it picked up. It's just a really great drama. I gave it a 9 out of 10, but I think if I gave it another viewing, I may go up to a 10, maybe. Who knows? I'm going to get around to watching it again soon. This is still cellophane wrapped. I've not watched it since I bought it, but when I saw it, when I rented it off someone, I borrowed it off someone, really loved it. Next is the Snowman Anniversary Edition, 30th Anniversary Edition. Yeah, it's a classic, isn't it? It's only like 30 minutes long, but it's on every Christmas, and there's a reason for it. It's just, yeah, really atmospheric piece of animation. Takes you to another world. It just has a way of giving you a warm, fuzzy glow inside. Next up is Son of Batman, a DC Animated Universe film. It's a good one. There are some things in it that just, aren't handled particularly well. Other stuff that is handled very well. I like the relationship between Batman and Damian Wayne in this. I hated Damian Wayne in the comic books. It's one of the reasons I went off the comic books. But they handle him pretty well in this film. They introduce him here. And, it's alright. It's a pretty decent film. It's not one of the best of the DC animated ones, but It's good, it's solid stuff. Next up is The Spirit, which I bought for £1.50 from CEX. I remember seeing this at the cinema and thinking it's not as bad as everyone makes out. It's not great either. It's not as good as Sin City. But I remember thinking it's got a certain charm to it. Yeah, you know, and who doesn't want to see Scarlett Johansson in there? And yeah, it's not a good film. I can't defend it, but I think there's a certain guilty pleasure element to it. I bought it cheap on Blu-ray, and I'm going to give it another watch at some point. I have only seen this once, and it was at the cinema. I just think it feels like one of them films that maybe deserves another shot, which is why I bought it. Next up is my joint favourite film of last year with Star Wars, as I said. Steve Jobs' brilliant script from Aaron Sorkin, as usual. Cracking performance from Michael Fassbender. Just a great film. Next up is Thor on Blu-ray. The Thor films aren't my favourite when it comes to the Marvel movies, but the Thor character is one of. Captain America is probably my favourite, but Thor is one of my favourites. He's one of the funniest. When you watch the Avengers Age of Ultron, he gets all the funny lines. He has all the funniest moments. I really like Chris Hemsworth as Thor. But the Thor films, the solo films, are maybe not the best when it comes to Marvel solo films. So I'm still waiting for a better version. I still love these, don't get me wrong. I love both the Thor films, but they're kind of deeply flawed in many ways. And I think they're lifted up a lot by Chris Hemsworth in the title role. Thor: The Dark World obviously comes next. If I've got the first one, I'm going to get the second one. I do like the Marvel movies. I think this is a better film than the first one. I think it has a weaker villain. The Dark Elf guy, played by Christopher Eccleston, is pretty much a non-event, really. He has no real characterization. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in the film to make it worth a watch, to the point where, like I say, I think it's better than the first one. Next up is Watchmen, the director's cut. Still haven't seen this. I've seen the theatrical cut, got the theatrical cut on DVD. I love Zack Snyder. I love Watchmen. It's one of my favourite comic book movies. So I'm definitely going to get around to watching this at some point in the near future. Next is Martin Scorsese's film, The Wolf of Wall Street. I hear so many good things about this film. I've been put off it for a long time just because of some of the stuff I hear is in it. But like I say, people keep saying it's so good, you got to watch it. I got this pretty cheap. It was like half price. You spend so much at HMV and then you get one at half price. So I thought, you know what, I'll pick it up. Still not seen it yet. Still a bit nervous about watching it, but I will get around to it, definitely. And that's it for movies. I just have a couple of, 3 TV series that I have on Blu-ray. So I'll just show you them. And first one is Bates Motel Season 2. I've got Season 1 on DVD. I'm looking forward to getting Season 3 at some point. Love this series. I love Psycho, the original Alfred Hitchcock film. I think it's Hitchcock's best, and this series does it justice, real justice. I was worried when it was first announced until I heard about the casting of Freddie Highmore and Vera Farmiga, and they live up to, well, the reputation they have as actors. It's brilliantly written, beautifully played and wonderfully directed, and the art direction is fantastic on it as well. Yeah, just a cracking series, one of the best TV series of the last 10 years. Picked this up, The Bible, for £8 at CEX, which is fairly cheap for a TV series on Blu-ray. Not seen it yet. Obvious reasons I picked it up. I'm a Christian, I want to see it. The few bits I have seen of it, clips and that, didn't fill me with confidence that it's going to be great. But seeing clips out of context isn't always the best way to make a judgment on something. So I want to give it its fair shot, which is why I picked it up. So I will sit down and watch this at some point, as I say. But we'll see. Finally, the last one on my collection is The Newsroom, complete 3rd season. I have the 1st season on DVD. I'm bizarrely missing the 2nd season. So yeah, I need to pick up the 2nd season. But this, again, Aaron Sorkin can do no wrong. You get Aaron Sorkin writing a script, you're going to get gold. And that's what this TV series is. If you're a fan of The West Wing, if you're a fan of Studio 60, you're going to love this. It's arguably better than those two, but arguably not as well. I'm a die-hard West Wing fan. It will always be West Wing for me. But yeah, if you love those series, you'll love this. And so there you go. That is my entire Blu-ray collection as it currently stands. As I say, as and when I get more Blu-rays, I will do the odd video here and there, Blu-ray updates and whatnot, so you can keep up with my collection as it goes along. But that's it, yeah. That was quite exhausting. That went on for much longer than I anticipated, considering I only had 2 shelves worth of Blu-rays. But there you go. Please let me know what you think of my collection. Let me know what you think I need to add to that collection, and yeah, just give me your general thoughts on this video. Comment below, let me know what you thought, and until next time, thanks for watching. I've been put off it.